All right, it is Bristol, baby, and it's the dirt race at Bristol. It's a little bit different, but I guess I should say it's more the same, I guess, from last year. It's the second time they're throwing dirt on Bristol. So they announced it halfway, I think, at the halfway point of the race last year, which was a complete disaster. And they announced it halfway during the race that they were going to be doing it again this year. And they've made some changes, which we'll talk about. But we got the Truck Series and the Cup Series at Bristol on the dirt this weekend, Easter Sunday, for the Cup race, and the Truck race is on Saturday night. No Xfinity this weekend, so this is just a video going over, I mean, pretty much both the Truck Series and the Cup Series, just from an initial thoughts and a race preview. We'll put out another video once the grid is officially set after the heat races. But I want to just quickly go over some of the things to keep in mind, some of the things that we are doing from an approach standpoint, and some of the things I think you should be considering as well. So, like I said, it's at Bristol, but it's not the normal Bristol. It's dirt. And since it is a dirt race, there's a lot of different ways you could potentially come into this weekend, or a lot of different things, a lot of different data points you could potentially look at. So for me, I'm basically throwing all that out the window. The only thing I really care about is how do they look in practice and how do they look in the heat races. I'm not looking at how they did last year at last year's Bristol dirt race. I'm not looking at if that driver has dirt experience or not. The only thing I'm focusing on is how do they look at practice? How do they look in the heat races? And how do they look over the course of the run? Because if you're not familiar with dirt racing, the track changes significantly from the beginning part of a run to the end part of the run. So having a car that is fast initially and then drops off at the end could potentially hurt you, or vice versa. Having a car that's really slow in the beginning but picks up as the track dries out, that could potentially benefit you as well, just depending on where we get the cautions, how long of green flag runs that we have. So it's a 250 lap race. I think the stages are, I think it's 75. Yeah, I think it's 75 laps for stage one. I think it's 75 laps for stage two. And I think stage three is 100 laps, if something like that. So we could potentially get some decent, long runs. And at the end of the stage breaks, I'm sure they're going to tend to the track and probably put more water on it. And the stage breaks will take much longer than they normally do to prep the track. So let's talk about some of these changes and why I'm basically throwing all the data out the window except for what data will be pouring in over the practice and heat races. So the first change is obviously it's a new car. So we're not running the Gen 6 cars that we ran last year. Obviously, this is the next gen car. So that's change number one. Change number two is Goodyear is bringing a different tire this year, and the tire plays a significant role. How the race plays out. Last year, the track wasn't able to hold any moisture. The tires got way too hot and they burnt off all the rubber. I mean, the treads on those things went away immediately fast. Tires, they were just burning through tires like it was nothing. So they have a new tire. It's supposed to dissipate more heat, hopefully. But again, that's another change. Another big significant change is they have new banking this year where it increases the higher that you get up the track. Last year was just kind of flat, same level of banking all over, where this year the inside of the turns aren't going to be as it's progressive. So as you go up, the banking gets higher and higher. So the configuration of the track is going to change, how you enter the corners, where potentially your apex is, how much you have to, how much throttle you're inputting, and it's all, there's so many different changes. But I'd say probably the biggest change is the start time of the race. So it's a Sunday night race. It's not during the day. Last year they ran a problem with having the sun trying to run the race in the middle of the daytime and the sun beating down on the track, and it was just a dust bowl. It wasn't really even a dirt track. None of the dirt guys did well. It got to the point where some of the cars weren't really even sliding around that much. Everyone's just kind of glued to the bottom, and no one could see out of the front windshields. Um, None of the fans could see. It was a mess of a race. So with all that in mind, again, there's so many variables. It doesn't make sense to look at anything other than how are they looking at practice and how are they looking in the heat races. It doesn't matter who that driver is, how much dirt experience they have. All the only thing you want to focus on is the data from this weekend. Let's see here. Another significant point is they're running non-competitive pit stops this weekend. So what does that mean? Basically means you can't advance your position on pit road like a normal race was. So the only way you can advance your position is by passing cars on the track. So you want to make sure you're rostering cars who have good speed and don't just start deep in the field, because the only way you can actually pass them is if your car is actually fast enough to get around them on the track, or if a driver in front of you, wrecks out or has a mechanical failure or something, obviously. But it's gonna be non-competitive pit stops. So that means where you come into the pits is where you're going to come out of the pits. Doesn't matter how long you're on there. I think it's a set amount of time that they have, significant time to change tires, wipe the windshields down, make any adjustments, make sure the cars aren't overheating. They'll have to rewater the track, retill it. So this track is going to change a ton. You'll see in practice, you'll see, when the track first starts, the color of it versus when the practice ends, like the color of the track, where guys are running, what the lap times are, how much dust there is, how much mud there is. Like, you're almost racing the track. It's some of these dirt races. And if your car is set up to adapt to the track changes and still run well, those are really the drivers I think you want to roster. You'll see drivers go out there when the track's really wet and they'll be laying down really, really fast lap times. And then as the run goes on, you'll see them, probably a lot of them fall off and their cars won't be handling as well. And you also see the opposite, guys who come out and they don't look like they have really good speed. It looks like they're off pace. And then as the run goes on, those are actually the cars that are showing good speed. So it'd be interesting to see who has like a short run car versus who has a long run car. There's still, just like I said, a lot of unknowns. We don't really know how this race is going to play out from like a DFS standpoint. If you want to just roster more drivers, towards the front, if you want to treat it more as like a place differential race where I think a lot of drivers are going to wreck out, and this is going to be kind of like a pure attrition survival type of race. It's probably going to be a little bit of a mix of both. Last year we saw a lot of dirt ringers, or really dirt ringers, I would say, kind of come into the truck series or the cup series, and we didn't really see any of them run well. And it's interesting, we don't have a ton of cup series drivers jumping down in the truck series to kind of buy a ride, or some of the cup teams, lending out their ride to different cup drivers this year. We see some of it, but a lot of the comments, a lot of the quotes from the drivers said, dirt experience doesn't really matter, just because these aren't dirt cars and it doesn't race like a dirt track. So just because you're familiar with dirt or you grew up in a dirt background doesn't mean you're going to perform well this weekend. So really, I just want to build lines after the starting grid is released. That's normally when we build lines, but if you can somehow record or watch practice and qualifying live, I think that's going to do you a lot of good instead of just looking at the practice times, because the practice times that you'll see are probably the first handful of laps on the track when the track has the most moisture in it and they're able to, put down the best lap times. But realistically, the track isn't going to be like that when you're racing. So just be aware and don't be afraid to dive into the data a little bit to really kind of select the drivers that you're confident about. But it's 250 laps, so there's still a decent amount of dominator points up for grabs. There's 62 and a half laps led points, 112.5 fast laps. So that's a good amount. So I think for me, I'm really just going to focus on drivers who I think have the potential to run fast laps, the potential to run up front. And then maybe pairing them with a couple place differential plays. But I'm not really worried about price. I'm not really worried about who the driver is. It's just more, how do they look throughout the weekend? Do they like their car? Is their car adapting well? Do they feel comfortable on the dirt? Those are the drivers we're going to want to target. So the biggest thing I really want you to take away from this is just ignore everything. You don't have to do too much looking into the previous Bristol dirt race, because it's going to be completely different this year. There isn't really a lot of data you can look into, I think, except for practice and the heat races this weekend. So that'll be it for the preview video. We'll have our spreadsheet posted on Twitter. It's at FastCarsFM for the Truck Series and the Cup Series, and we'll most likely be doing at least the Cup Series video. Not sure if we'll be able to get a Truck Series video out on Saturday, just with how short the heat races are to the start of the race. But if we can, we'll most likely do that. But regardless, we'll at least have a spreadsheet going over who we like, interest levels, all that stuff. So that'll do it for Bristol, and at least the preview video, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.